I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. I was walking past the living room when my dad leaned toward my brother and said in a flat, final tone, "Your sister? She's worthless, she's done. Not worth a penny." The words hit me harder than any slap, and what broke me wasn't just the cruelty, it was what came after. I turned to look at Mom. She was sitting right there, folding laundry like nothing had happened. And then, she smiled. Not at me. Not even at Dad. Just this cold, satisfied smile. My breath caught in my throat. At that moment, I realized I wasn't a daughter in this house. I was an outsider. A liability. A burden they wanted to erase. I froze at the edge of the doorway, too stunned to move. My brother chuckled, shrugged, and kept scrolling on his phone. Like my existence didn't matter. I stumbled back into my room, shut the door, and pressed my back against it, shaking. That night, while the house slept, I moved every dollar I had from the joint family account into one under my own name. It wasn't much, just $18,000 I'd been saving from my job at the cafe, scraping tips and overtime shifts. But it was mine, and if they thought I was worthless, then fine. They wouldn't see a single penny of what I had left. My name is Emily Carter. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me, because you're about to hear how I turned those words, "she's worthless, she's done," into the beginning of something they never saw coming. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? Like the very people who were supposed to love you decided you were disposable? That night, I promised myself, if they thought I was done, I'd prove them wrong in ways that would cut deeper than anything they could imagine. I sat on the floor, laptop glowing in the dark, typing through tears, looking for apartments, jobs, any lifeline that could pull me out of their world. But deep down, I knew, leaving wasn't enough. I didn't just want freedom. I wanted to show them that the daughter they dismissed was the one who would rise higher than they could ever reach. And as I clicked transfer funds and watched the account balance shift to zero, I whispered to myself, they won't see me coming. That was the night I started my revenge. The next morning, I came downstairs like nothing had happened. Dad was sipping his black coffee at the kitchen table, scrolling through the news. My brother, Tyler, had his feet kicked up on a chair, shoving cereal into his mouth. Mom was humming at the stove, the smell of bacon filling the air. And me? I moved like a ghost. Not one of them looked up. Not one of them acknowledged me. It was like I didn't exist. I sat quietly, pouring myself a glass of water. But inside, my chest was burning. I remembered Dad's exact words, "Your sister? She's worthless, she's done." Done. As if my life was some project he'd given up on. As if my future was already buried. I forced myself to swallow the anger. Because now I had something they didn't know, control of my own money. When Dad finally looked at me, it wasn't with love. It wasn't even with hate. It was worse. Indifference. "Don't be late paying the power bill," he said flatly. "I told Tyler to send the rent check last night, but you know how he forgets." I blinked. Power bill? Rent check? That's when it hit me. They'd been using my savings. Not just the joint account, but my hard-earned tips and paychecks. They were funneling everything through me, because I was the only one working steady hours. And they never intended to thank me. They just assumed I'd keep bleeding myself dry for them. I set my glass down carefully, my hand trembling. "Sure," I whispered. Mom turned, sliding a plate of bacon onto the table. She met my eyes, calm, cool, satisfied, and said, "Good girl. Good girl," like I was a pet following orders. I chewed on the inside of my cheek to keep from screaming, but inside, I knew what they didn't. The accounts were empty now. Every dollar was mine, locked away where their greedy hands couldn't touch it. That day at work, I could barely focus. I pulled shots of espresso, faked smiles at customers, and replayed Dad's voice over and over. "She's worthless, she's done." By the time my shift ended, I'd made a decision. I wasn't just leaving. I was going to build something out of spite, something they'd never be able to touch. Never be able to steal, never be able to claim credit for. When I got home, Tyler was sprawled on the couch, playing video games. He didn't look up as he said, "Hey, Dad said you need to transfer him $300 for the car payment." My hands tightened around my purse. "Tell Dad I'm done," I said. My voice was low, but sharp enough to cut the air. Tyler froze. Finally, he turned to look at me. Confused. Maybe even nervous. "What's that supposed to mean?" I walked past him, up the stairs, my heart pounding. What it meant was simple. The game had just begun. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I could still hear Dad's voice echoing in my skull. Like a broken record, she's worthless, she's done. Every time those words replayed, I clenched my fists tighter. By dawn, I knew one thing: I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to outgrow them. Outshine them. Prove them wrong in a way they couldn't ignore. But first, I needed to disappear. At work, I started pulling double shifts, smiling wider, talking less. My boss, Linda, noticed. "You okay, Em? You look restless." I gave her a small smile. "Just saving up." She nodded, sliding me an extra shift for the weekend. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, waiting for everyone else to go to bed. I scrolled through apartment listings, typing in numbers, checking maps. Every option was either too expensive or too far. Then I saw it, a small studio above a laundromat downtown. The rent was $1,200 a month. Tiny, old, but mine. I could almost smell the freedom in the peeling wallpaper and cracked tiles. I clicked schedule viewing, but freedom alone wasn't enough, because as much as I wanted to escape, part of me burned for something bigger. I wanted to make them choke on their words. The next day, at the cafe, a customer left behind a laptop bag. When I chased her down to return it, she laughed. "God, thank you. I've got my entire business plan in here." "Business plan?" I asked. She grinned. "Yeah. Online shop. Handmade jewelry. I'm about to launch next month. You'd be shocked how much money people pay for pretty stones." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Business. Independence. A way to turn my savings into something real. I sat cross-legged on my bed, sketching ideas on a scrap of paper. Bracelets. Necklaces. Rings. Not because I knew how yet, but because the thought of building something from nothing lit a fire in me. The next morning, Dad was pacing the living room, red in the face. "Where's the money?" he snapped. I froze. "What money?" "The account," he barked. "It's empty." "Don't play dumb, Emily. We needed that for bills." Tyler looked up from the couch, eyebrows raised. Mom crossed her arms, silent but watching. I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. "It's mine," I said. Dad's jaw tightened. His eyes, cold and sharp, drilled into me. "You think you can just take what you want? You live under this roof because of us. Don't forget that." For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the fridge. Then Mom smiled again, that same cruel, knowing smile, and I realized something. They didn't see me as family, they saw me as a wallet, and wallets can be emptied. Dad's words rattled in my chest long after he stormed out of the room. "You live under this roof because of us. Don't forget that." But in that moment, I knew the truth. I wasn't living under their roof because of them. I was surviving in spite of them. The next morning, I packed a small duffel bag, just clothes, my laptop, and the envelope with $18,000 in cashier's checks. I stuffed it under my bed, hidden but ready. I wasn't running yet. But I wanted to feel the weight of escape close enough to touch. At the cafe, I worked non-stop, eyes scanning the crowd, mind racing with ideas. That woman and her jewelry shop wouldn't leave my head. If she could turn beads and stones into freedom, so could I. After my shift, I walked into a craft store and spent $120 on supplies. Wire cutters. Pliers. Packs of beads that shimmered like tiny galaxies. When the cashier handed me the bag, I clutched it like a lifeline. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor with YouTube tutorials playing softly. My fingers fumbled, bled, learned. By dawn, I'd made 6 bracelets. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. When Mom barged in without knocking, her eyes swept over the beads scattered across the carpet. "What's this?" she asked, her tone sharp, suspicious. "Nothing," I muttered, shoving the pieces under my blanket. She smirked. "Don't waste time on childish hobbies. You'll never make real money from that." I bit down hard on my tongue, tasting blood, because all I wanted to do was scream, "Watch me." That weekend, I listed my first pieces on Etsy. I used my middle name, Grace, as the shop name, because if my family ever stumbled across it, I wanted them blind to it. The first bracelet sold in less than 24 hours. $25. It wasn't much. But to me, it was a declaration. Proof that I wasn't worthless. Proof that someone, somewhere, saw value in what I created. Meanwhile, at home, the tension grew sharper. Dad was demanding his money back. Tyler whined about overdue bills. Mom sighed dramatically, shaking her head like I'd ruined everything. Do you have any idea how selfish you're being? She spat one night at dinner. We've sacrificed so much for you, Emily. And this is how you repay us? Sacrificed? I almost laughed out. I thought about every shift I'd covered, every tip I'd scraped, every bill I'd paid with my own hands. Their sacrifice was a lie. My sacrifice was the only reason this house was standing. But I didn't argue. I just looked at Mom, calm and steady, and said, I'm not your wallet anymore. The room went silent. Dad slammed his fork down so hard it cracked the plate, and for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, not because they cared about losing me, but because they were starting to realize they'd lost control. The crack in Dad's plate felt like a sign something in the house had shifted. And they knew it. I wasn't theirs to control anymore, but freedom came with a cost, one I felt the very next morning. Dad cornered me in the hallway, his voice low, threatening. You think you can just walk away, Emily? You owe us. Don't forget who raised you. I stared at him, my hands shaking but my voice steady. Raised me? Or used me? His eyes darkened. For a second, I thought he might hit me. But instead, he sneered, muttered, ungrateful brat, and stormed off. Ungrateful. That was their favorite word, but what they didn't see was that while they threw insults, I was building something they couldn't touch. My little Etsy shop, Grace Designs, started to grow. One bracelet became 10 orders. 10 became 20. Soon, my tiny studio of beads was pulling in $600 a week. More than I made at the cafe. I reinvested every dollar. Bought better tools, higher quality stones. I learned branding, photography, marketing. I worked until my fingers ached and my eyes blurred, and with every package I shipped out, I felt myself rising higher. Meanwhile, the house was rotting from the inside, bills piled up. Tyler's car got repossessed. Dad screamed about lazy kids even though he hadn't worked in years. Mom pawned her jewelry but lied, saying it was in repair. The more they struggled, the calmer I became. Because I knew the truth, they were sinking, and I was climbing. One night, Mom barged into my room again, her eyes darting to the packages stacked in the corner. What is this? What are you hiding? I didn't bother to cover it up this time. I held up a bracelet, the stones catching the light. It's mine, I said. And it's worth more than you ever believed I was. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Jewelry won't pay rent. Funny, I said, because it already paid this month's. The shock in her eyes was delicious. For once, she had no script. No lecture. Just silence. The next day, Dad exploded when he realized I'd stopped transferring money into the joint account altogether. You think you're better than us now? He roared, slamming his fist against the wall so hard a picture frame shattered. I stood my ground, my heart racing. No. I don't think I'm better. I just finally know my worth. And it's not yours to decide. The room shook with his rage. But inside me, something stronger had taken root. A quiet power, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to them. I was leading my own story, and with every dollar earned, every order shipped, I was proving him wrong, proving all of them wrong. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of their downfall. By the time fall came, the house was collapsing like a slow-motion avalanche. The power got shut off one Tuesday morning. The water followed 2 weeks later. Tyler stormed around, cursing, blaming everyone but himself. Dad grew meaner, quieter, like a storm before lightning. And Mom? She pretended everything was fine, lighting candles at dinner as if the darkness was romantic. But I wasn't suffering with them, because I had already signed the lease for the studio apartment above the laundromat. My key was warm in my pocket every day at work, reminding me I had an escape hatch they couldn't touch. And still, I stayed, not because I needed them, but because I wanted them to watch me slip through their fingers. One night, Dad cornered me again. His voice was gravel, his face red. You think you're smart, don't you? With your little trinkets, your side hustle. But when you fall flat on your face, don't you dare come crawling back here. I tilted my head, calm. That's the difference between us, Dad. I don't crawl. For a moment, his hand twitched like he might swing. But then he saw something in my eyes, steel he hadn't put there. Steel he couldn't break. He turned away. That was the night I realized he wasn't scary anymore. The power he held over me was gone, and I wanted him to feel it. So I made sure he did. The next morning, when the landlord called my phone about unpaid rent, I told him flatly, "Don't call me. I don't live there anymore. Call my father. The lease is in his name." Dad nearly tore the door off its hinges when he found out. "You did this? You're trying to ruin us." I met his rage with silence. And silence was worse than any fight, because for the first time, he saw it. I wasn't afraid. I was untouchable. Meanwhile, my shop exploded. A TikTok creator wore one of my necklaces in a video, and overnight my orders tripled. I hit $10,000 in sales that month alone. My little side hustle had become a real business, and every time I printed a shipping label, I imagined Dad's voice in my head: "She's worthless. She's done. Worthless. Done." The words fueled me, shaped me, sharpened me. One night, after another screaming match downstairs, I packed my duffel and walked out the door. No tears. No goodbye, just the sound of the lock clicking behind me. When I slid my key into the door of my studio apartment, the air smelled like dust and freedom. The walls were bare, the floor creaked, but it was mine. I collapsed on the mattress I'd dragged in and whispered to the empty room, "They wanted me done. Now I'm just getting started." And somewhere deep down, I knew, this wasn't just survival anymore. It was revenge in slow motion. Success didn't come quietly. It roared, within 6 months. Grace Designs wasn't just a shop, it was a brand. My TikTok page exploded with followers. Influencers wore my necklaces. My inbox overflowed with wholesale requests. I quit the cafe, signed a bigger lease for a workshop, and hired 2 part-time assistants, and every order slip, every dollar earned, every glowing review was a blade against the memory of Dad's voice. "She's worthless, she's done." Because now I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. But revenge isn't complete until the ones who dismissed you are forced to watch, and oh, I made sure they did. It started small. A family friend messaged me, "Hey, saw your jewelry on TikTok. Crazy proud of you. Your parents must be thrilled." I smirked. "You should ask them." Because of course, my parents hadn't said a word. Not congratulations, not acknowledgement, not even a text, but silence can't hide the truth forever. Thanksgiving, when relatives gathered, my cousin Emily, same name, always a running joke, clinked her glass and said, "By the way, have you all seen this?" She held up her phone, my shop glowing on the screen. "Are Emily's famous now?" The room buzzed with whispers, questions, congratulations. And my parents? Dad's face tightened, jaw locked. Mom forced a smile so thin it nearly cracked her skin. Tyler muttered something about lucky timing. I sat there, calm, steady, letting their silence scream louder than words. They couldn't deny it anymore. The daughter they wrote off as worthless had become the one people admired, but I wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, the house went into foreclosure. Dad had stopped paying the mortgage months ago. Letters piled on the counter, unopened, until the sheriff's notice finally came. That's when Mom called me. Her voice was trembling, sugar sweet like poison. "Emily, honey? We're in a little bind. Your father's health isn't great, and the bank's being unreasonable. Could you maybe help us out? Just until things settle?" I let the silence stretch, then I asked, calm as glass, "Remind me, Mom. What was it Dad said again? Something about me being worthless?" She stammered. "Oh, Emily, you know he didn't mean," I cut her off. "He did. And you smiled." For the first time, her mask slipped. I heard it, the crack in her voice, the panic underneath. "Please, Emily. We're your family." Family, the word was ash in my mouth. I ended the call. No explanation. No sympathy, just silence, because sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. And as I sat in my studio, surrounded by orders, my bank balance glowing with 6 figures, I realized something: they were crumbling, and I was rising higher than they could ever reach. The foreclosure hit them like a storm. Dad raged, Mom wept, Tyler cursed. But rage doesn't pay bills, and tears don't stop eviction notices. They packed their lives into cardboard boxes, faces pale with shame. The house that once rang with their cruelty now echoed with emptiness. And me? I watched from a distance. Not out of pity. Not out of gloating. But because sometimes the most powerful revenge is to witness the collapse without lifting a finger. Weeks later, a neighbor sent me a photo, my parents standing in line at a food pantry. Tyler behind them, scowling, holding a plastic bag of canned goods. The sight pierced me in a way I didn't expect, not with sorrow, with clarity. This was the family that told me I was done. Worthless. Nothing. And now they stood where they had pushed me for years, on the edge of survival. One evening, Mom tried again. A voicemail, her voice cracking. Emily? We're sorry. We shouldn't have said those things. We need you. Please, just help us this once. I listened to the message twice. My chest ached, not with longing, but with finality, because forgiveness doesn't erase scars. And survival doesn't erase betrayal. So I did the only thing I could. I mailed them a package. Inside was one of my best-selling bracelets, shining with polished stone and silver. Attached was a card that read, "You said I wasn't worth a penny. This sells for $85. Completed." No money. No note. Just proof that the daughter they dismissed had built an empire from the very ashes of their words, proof that their cruelty had become my fire. When the tracking notification said delivered, I closed my laptop and sat in the stillness of my studio.